Many gardeners start the spring with massive harvests, only to walk outside in August and find empty garden beds. That happens because standard, determinate crops are bred for a single event. They put all their energy into one massive flush of food, and then their life cycle is over. To keep a garden active all season long, you have to plant indeterminate crops. These are continuous producers that keep flowering and fruiting for months. This graph illustrates the difference. Single harvest varieties give you a sharp spike in volume that drops to zero. Continuous producers give you a steady, rolling wave of yield that extends straight through the summer and into the fall. Avoiding an empty August means planting crops with those rolling yield curves. It shifts your job in the garden. You stop being a planter and you become a manager. To manage continuous crops, you have to understand the central rule of the vegetable garden. A plant does not want to feed you. Its only biological goal is to mature its seeds for the next generation. If a vegetable fully matures on the vine, the seeds inside harden. Once that happens, the parent vine immediately shuts down and dies. We keep plants producing by interrupting that cycle. When we pick fruits prematurely, we steal the plant's seeds before they mature. The plant reacts by generating new flowers to try again. This creates a direct return on investment framework. Continuous food output requires the continuous labor input of biological interruption. An endless harvest is never a passive process. You are entering a biological contract where you trade frequent labor for a sustained yield. Indeterminate tomatoes and summer squash sit at the absolute top of the garden portfolio. They offer the highest possible yields, but they demand the heaviest labor inputs. Tomatoes require a massive structural setup on day one. Because the vines never stop growing, you have to install heavy-duty trellises at least 5 to 7 feet tall. From there, the weekly maintenance starts. You have to aggressively prune out side shoots, called suckers, to maintain airflow, and you must apply high-potassium fertilizer to support the constant fruit production. Looking at the decision scorecard for indeterminate tomatoes, the costs are clear. The space required, harvest frequency, and feeding needs all rate as high. Zucchini requires a different kind of effort. Just 1 or 2 healthy plants can generate a massive volume of food. To get that yield, you have to inspect the plants visually every single day. You need to harvest the fruits strictly when they hit the 6 to 8 inch mark. This diagram shows the biological penalty of missing a zucchini harvest. A single overgrown squash will absorb 100% of the plant's nutrient flow. It literally cuts off resources to the rest of the vine, causing all new blossoms to abort and drop off. These 2 crops can completely replace a family's produce bill for the summer. But that output only exists if you commit to unrelenting daily and weekly labor. If you are working with a tight layout, you need to shift to pole beans. Pole beans maximize your spatial return on investment. Instead of consuming valuable ground square footage, they convert vertical airspace into heavy crop yields. Checking the scorecard for pole beans reveals a specific profile. Ground space and feeding needs are low, but the harvest frequency is high. The labor required here is incredibly strict. You have to pick the pods every 48 to 72 hours, making sure to pull them while they are still slim and immature. The penalty for falling behind is permanent. If you allow even 1 single pod's seeds to harden, it sends a chemical signal through the vine that halts all future flowering for the rest of the year. You get maximum spatial efficiency, but the direct cost is an unforgiving 3-day harvest obligation. Weekend gardeners need plants that tolerate neglect. That means planting cut-and-come-again greens like hardy kale and Swiss chard, along with ever-bearing strawberries. Leafy greens use a specific harvesting mechanic. You leave the center of the plant alone and only harvest the mature outer leaves. This cross-section shows exactly how that works. By keeping the central crown intact and removing the bottom 1/3 of the foliage, the plant survives the harvest. The pruning forces new vertical growth straight from the center. Because of this mechanic, these greens offer incredible longevity. They routinely survive mild frosts and can keep producing for 8 to 10 months. The trade-off for that long lifespan is pest pressure. Because they live so long, you will spend months actively managing insects like cabbage worms to protect the foliage. Ever-bearing or day-neutral strawberries serve as the perfect perennial container crop counterpart to those greens. The required input here is simple pruning. You have to manually snip off the excess vine shoots, called runners, to force the plant to redirect its energy into making fruit instead of cloning itself. The scorecard for ever-bearing strawberries makes them incredibly appealing. The space required, the harvest frequency, and the feeding needs all rate as low. But there is a compromise. You secure 2 or 3 distinct fleshes of fruit, but you sacrifice the massive single-batch fruit sizes that standard commercial varieties produce. These forgiving crops present the lowest maintenance barrier. You trade peak daily volume for extreme resilience and longevity. A successful garden requires matching the plant's biology directly to your real-world schedule. We can map these options on a simple scatter plot, comparing the time required to maintain the plant against the total volume of food it produces. For the homestead demographic, or the daily picker, tomatoes and zucchini sit firmly in the high-yield, high-maintenance quadrant. For the weekend gardener, kale, chard, and strawberries sit safely in the low-maintenance zone. The core rule applies across the board. Never plant a continuous producer if you are not prepared to execute the continuous harvesting regimen. In a high ROI garden, the scissors are just as important as the watering can. That steady cycle of harvesting is what sustains your garden right through the fall.